Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a seriously fascinating question. How on earth did the most powerful man in the ancient world keep himself sane? Imagine having absolute, unchecked authority over the known world. You could have any luxury, any pleasure, exact revenge on anyone who looked at you funny. What would you actually do with all that power? Well, today, we're looking at a man who literally had the whole shebang. And instead of writing some massive ego-driven manifesto about how great he wrote a manual on how to be a good, restrained human being.
And you know what's truly mind-blowing about his words? They weren't written for an audience at all. These thoughts were just a private reminder from a Roman emperor to himself. These notes, what we now call his meditations, were never, ever meant for publication. They were literally just a tool he used to discipline his own mind. It was an intimate journal he jotted down to ease his heart and remind himself of his core principles when the world around him was completely descending into chaos.
Section 1. The Emperor's Secret Diary. To really grasp the profound weight of these intimate thoughts, we first need to understand the man who wrote them and the incredible, crushing burdens he carried every single day. Marcus Aurelius was born in 121 AD and rose to become the Emperor of Rome in 161 AD. History remembers him as the last of the 5 good emperors. But definitely do not let that title fool you into thinking his time on the throne was a breeze. He ruled during a period of immense global chaos. His reign was basically a relentless parade of grueling tasks, and honestly, nothing but a stern sense of duty could have carried him through it. When you think about the man holding that much absolute power, it's almost hard to believe he's the one who wrote a diary entirely focused on self-restraint, humility, and avoiding the corruption of power. He was commanding vast armies and controlling immense wealth, yet he was constantly reminding himself not to get swept up in the pomp and glory of his position. Instead, he wanted to contract himself down to the state of an ordinary private man. And this just brilliantly illustrates the paradox of his life. Look at what he was actually dealing with. His reign was defined by constant, brutal wars against northern tribes. His empire was being ravaged by a devastating plague brought back by his own legions, not to mention terrible famines and destructive floods. And as if that wasn't enough, he faced heartbreaking betrayal by his most trusted eastern governor, who literally tried to steal his throne. But despite facing war, plague, and treason, Marcus Aurelius used his private writings to anchor his mind. He didn't lash out, he looked inward.
Section 2. The Stoic Operating System. So how exactly did he cope with all this unrelenting pressure without totally losing his mind? Well, he needed a framework, a way to process the chaos. He relied heavily on Stoicism, an ancient philosophy that essentially served as his mental operating system. For the Stoics, virtue simply meant to live consistently or in conformity with nature. Now, that doesn't mean just giving in to your natural impulses like a wild animal. It means understanding the universe and your specific place within it. The absolute highest good in this system is consciously working alongside divine providence for the common good. It's all about preserving your rational spirit so it doesn't get dragged down by the chaotic events happening around you.
So, the crucial takeaway here is this core Stoic division. The philosophy demands a super careful distinction between what we can control and what we cannot. Things in our power are strictly internal: our desires, our opinions, and our own will. Things entirely out of our power are external: our health, our wealth, our honor, and critically, the actions of other people. The secret is that we must absolutely control our internal world, precisely because the external world is ultimately completely out of our hands. Section 3. Cultivating the Inner Retreat.
Let's move over to his practical advice, because understanding the philosophy is one thing, but actually living it under intense pressure is something else entirely. Marcus had this really profound realization. He noticed that people are always trying to find these quiet, private retreating places, escaping to country villages, the seashore, the mountains, just to get away from their stress. But he realized that booking some expensive vacation is completely pointless if your mind is still a total mess. True tranquility isn't found by changing your zip code. It's an internal retreat. He believes that if you've actually ordered your mind, you can instantly find perfect ease and tranquility just by looking inward. Anywhere, anytime.
And just think about the context of where he was writing this stuff. The very first book of his meditations was written while he was stuck in a freezing military camp, actively campaigning against barbarian tribes. If a Roman emperor could find mental quiet and retreat into his own soul while commanding an army right in the middle of the coarse, violent clangor of arms,
Well, we can definitely find a moment of peace during a stressful workday or a tough morning commute, right?
Section 4. Dealing with difficult people.
Now, what about dealing with toxic or difficult people? This is something we all face, and let's be real, it's often the absolute hardest part of maintaining our peace of mind. Well, Marcus Aurelius practically invented a cognitive behavioral therapy routine for this exact problem. He literally started his mornings by mentally preparing himself for the absolute worst behaviors in others. He'd anticipate running into the unthankful, the envious, the false. By expecting to meet these types of people right out of the gate, he totally removed the element of surprise. So when someone eventually acted terribly later that day, he was already perfectly prepared for it. Instead of getting furious, he used this brilliant 3-step mental diffusion process. First, he'd acknowledge that they're acting out of pure ignorance of what's truly good and bad. Second, he'd remember that they share the exact same rational nature that he does. And third, and honestly, this is my favorite part, he recognized that we are fundamentally meant to cooperate. He compared it to our upper and lower teeth. To be in opposition to each other is simply against human nature.
And this leads to such a powerful takeaway. Think about how often we let someone else's bad behavior drag us right down to their level. For Marcus, the ultimate victory wasn't crushing his enemies or firing back a witty insult. No way. True strength is refusing to let someone else's toxicity change your own character. You win by remaining kind, just, and completely in control of your own rational mind.
Section 5. Turning obstacles into fuel.
Okay, but what happens when life throws massive, unavoidable obstacles in our way? We've managed our internal retreat, we've dealt with the annoying people, but what about sheer catastrophe? Well, there's this absolutely beautiful metaphor from Book 4 of his diary that completely shifts how we view adversity. He didn't see an obstacle as a roadblock that stops progress. He viewed it as the literal fuel needed to grow stronger. When things fall out completely contrary to our plans, the Stoic mind takes that new, unwanted reality and simply makes it the proper object of its focus.
Just think about this comparison. A tiny little fire is super easily quenched if you throw something heavy on it, right? But a great roaring fire, it consumes whatever you throw into it. It turns the obstacle into its own nature, and it actually grows even larger because of it. We have that choice every single day. Are we going to be the small, easily extinguished flame when things get tough? Or are we going to be the roaring fire that takes setbacks, delays, and tragedies and uses them as the raw material for our own success and character growth? Conclusion: the brevity of life. To keep all of this daily struggle in perspective, Marcus constantly reminded himself to zoom all the way out to the ultimate cosmic scale. From his position of supreme, unmatched power, he would look back at history's great conquerors, guys like Alexander the Great, Pompey, and Julius Caesar, men who destroyed entire cities and cut down tens of thousands on the battlefield. But Marcus realized the ultimate humbling irony. Despite their massive empires and terrifying power, they too eventually had to part with their own lives. They ended up in the dirt just like everybody else. He distilled his entire existence down to these incredibly humbling facts. The time of a man's life, it's just a tiny point. The substance of the body, it's constantly flowing toward corruption. Leaving a legacy or achieving massive fame, it's entirely empty. Honestly, it's nothing better than oblivion, preserved by mortal men who are also going to die soon and be forgotten. He concluded that only one single thing remains: philosophy, the active daily preservation of that inner spirit, keeping it free from wrong and completely content with its lot. Which brings us to the end of our explainer. If a Roman emperor, a guy possessing all the wealth and power in the ancient world, concluded that the present moment is literally the only thing we actually possess, it kind of demands that we ask ourselves the exact same thing. If your life is just a fleeting moment in eternity, what truly matters in the brief time you have left? I'll leave you to reflect on that profound thought from the Emperor's secret diary. Hopefully it sparks a deeper curiosity about cultivating your own inner retreat. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive.